Michael did to Lucifer on Moses' body. In the vastness of the universe, where the first light emerged from nothingness, God created the angels as radiant beings, sparkling with pure power. These beings, with wings that sparkled like crystal in the sunlight, flew through the high heavens, witnessing the formation of all things. Lucifer, the first and most brilliant being, stood as the archangel with a golden halo surrounding his tall body, his long black hair flying like shooting stars. He was considered the firstborn son of God, not by birth from flesh and blood, but by being created first, carrying immense power over the entire universe. His eyes sparkled like distant stars, and his voice echoed like thunder through the dimensions. But then, God decided to give birth to a second son, Jesus, the true light of all things. Jesus appeared as a bright light, spreading warmth through every dark corner, with a perfect human form, deep blue eyes containing boundless wisdom. The angels, including Michael with his muscular body, silver armor shining in the celestial light, were created first to witness this birth. Michael, the faithful entity, always stood to the right of the throne, with a blazing sword in his hand, observing everything with a solemn expression, eyebrows raised as if contemplating the fate of the universe. Lucifer felt this change like a cold wind blowing through his soul. He, with the right of birth, believed himself to be the rightful heir of all creation. The image of him standing at the highest peak of heaven, looking down on the lower heavens, with his hand clenched as if holding destiny, was gradually obscured by the appearance of Jesus. God gave Jesus dominion over the entire universe, as recorded in Matthew, where Jesus declared, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Lucifer became angry. His body shook. His golden aura turned red with anger, because he thought that according to the ancient birthright, he was the true successor. The hierarchy of beings is evident. Other angels, such as Gabriel with his white wings and sparkling golden trumpets, or Raphael with his blue cloak symbolizing healing, bow before Jesus. They hover around the throne, creating a vivid picture of multicolored light reflected through the fluffy white clouds. Lucifer, standing alone in the far corner, his eyes flashed with jealousy, his mouth murmuring unspoken complaints. Evil began to creep into his heart, like a darkness creeping through a dense forest, blocking out the morning light. God foresaw this degeneration, as described in Ezekiel. "You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, until iniquity was found in you." Lucifer was no longer the rightful heir, because pride had tainted his soul. He began to plot, moving among the other angels, whispering enticements, causing some of the entities to follow him, their eyes gradually turning cloudy instead of sparkling. Lucifer, his towering figure and his aura now distorted by darkness, began to rebel. He gathered a third of the angels, once loyal beings who had been swept away by the false promise of self-rule. The picture of heaven changed, from a peaceful place with rivers of light flowing through crystal palaces, to a battlefield with the roar of thunder and the flash of lightning from clashing swords. Michael, the loyal being, led the loyal angelic forces, with silver armor, reflecting the light of God, into battle. In the coming apocalypse, Michael will rebuke Lucifer in the name of God, because he has no direct authority. Currently, Lucifer is still superior to Michael in his original rank, but Michael uses the name of God as a tool, making him the weapon that defeats the traitor. Lucifer, with his jet-black wings now blocking the sky, shouts, "I will ascend higher than the clouds. I will be like the Most High." As in Isaiah, he thought his birthright was unchangeable, but God judged the wickedness in him. The battle was fierce, with fallen angels crashing into the faithful, creating chaos. Broken wings fell like autumn leaves. Angelic blood sparkled like meteors falling to the lower heavens. Jesus, watching from his throne, with the light of his body radiating, gave power to Michael. Lucifer was defeated, his body falling from heaven like a ball of fire. As Jesus said in Luke, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." He landed on earth, which would later become his playground. Some fallen angels, according to the book of Enoch, envied humans for their free will. They created images of humans in their minds, longing to possess physical bodies, with warm flesh and blood instead of pure souls. These beings, with eyes red with envy, looked down upon the emerging earth, where God was about to create Adam. They were bound by rank, without the freedom of choice that humans would later have. Lucifer, now known as Satan, roamed the earth, his body transformed into a dark entity with curved horns and a whip-like tail. He harbored hatred, plotting to overthrow his second brother, Jesus, and the third brother to come, Adam. In the vast expanse of heaven, where the crystal palaces glittered with eternal light, a storm of darkness began to form. Lucifer, once the most resplendent archangel, now stood on a towering hill, his jet-black wings blocking the light from the throne of God. His once golden glory had turned to an angry red, like a fire burning in his chest. His long jet-black hair fluttered in the celestial wind, and his eyes flashed with a cold light, like two sapphires tainted by pride. He raised his hand, his voice thundering through the heavens. "I will ascend above the clouds. I will be like the Most High." As recorded in Isaiah, Lucifer did not act alone. He had convinced a third of the angels, beings who once sparkled like stars in the night sky, to be drawn into the false promise of self-rule. These fallen angels, their wings gradually turning from pure white to gray, gathered around him, forming a dark army. Each entity had a heavenly beauty, but the light in their eyes was now obscured by doubt and jealousy. They stood in rows, their armor shining but distorted, like broken mirrors, reflecting the chaos in their souls. Facing the rebel forces was Michael, a warrior angel with a muscular body, clad in silver armor that shone as bright as the full moon. The flaming sword in his hand burned, emitting a blinding white light, as if the light of God itself had been forged into a weapon. Michael stood on a crystal mountain peak, his vast silver wings spread, ready to protect the order of heaven. Beside him were Gabriel, with his golden trumpet shining, and Raphael, his blue cloak fluttering, carrying the power of healing. They led the loyal angelic army, entities that still retained their pure light, with wings as white as newly fallen snow. The battle broke out, turning heaven into a chaotic battlefield. The crystal palaces shook under the roar of thunder, and the lightning from the clashing swords flashed like shooting stars. The fallen angels charged at their opponents, their wings broken, falling like autumn leaves in a storm. Angel blood, sparkling like liquid stars, dripped into the lower heavens, creating long streaks of light in the space. Michael slashed his flaming sword through the air, each slash tearing apart the curtain of darkness that Lucifer had spread. He shouted loudly, his voice echoing, "In the name of God, you shall not prevail." But Lucifer, with a cold smile, responded with a blast of dark energy, causing the ground of heaven to split open. Jesus, the second son, stood on the throne, the light from his body spreading like a sun, shining through the darkness that Lucifer had created. He did not directly participate in the battle, but his power flowed through Michael, making his sword shine even brighter. Lucifer, strong as he was, could not withstand this power. He was pushed back, his tall body shook, and finally, like a ball of blazing fire, he fell from heaven to earth. As Jesus said in Luke, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." The image of him falling, with his wings burned and the red light fading, was a terrifying sight, like a shooting star streaking across the night sky. When he landed on earth, Lucifer, now Satan, was transformed. His halo dimmed, his tall body now shrunk, with sharp curved horns growing from his head and a long tail that whipped like a whip. His eyes were red, filled with deep hatred. He stood on a desolate hill, looking up at the sky where heaven still sparkled, and swore revenge. The other fallen angels, according to the Book of Enoch, stood around him, with envious eyes on the soon-to-be-created humans, beings who would receive the gift they never had: free will. On earth, a lush green garden appeared, where the golden sunlight filtered through the tall trees, making the dewdrops on the leaves sparkle. The Garden of Eden, with its clear rivers flowing over smooth rocks, was where God created Adam. From the dust of the earth, God molded a perfect body, tanned skin, toned muscles, long brown hair that fluttered in the wind, and deep brown eyes that seemed to reflect the universe. Adam opened his eyes, amazed by the beauty of the world. He walked on soft grass, breathed in the sweet scent of wildflowers, and heard birds chirping from the branches of the tall trees. God gave Adam dominion over the third heaven, which had once belonged to the fallen angels, and more importantly, free will, the ability to choose between good and evil, a gift that even the angels did not have. Adam was not born of flesh and blood, but was created directly by the hand of God, making him a son of God, with a birthright on earth. He stood by the river, looking at his reflection in the water, and smiled, feeling the vitality of his body. Satan, from the darkness of the garden, watched Adam with hatred in his eyes. He hid behind the dense bushes, his dark body with green scales, like a giant snake. His red eyes flashed, and his voice whispered maliciously, "Why is this unclean one given freedom, while I, the archangel, am bound?" He felt his birthright being taken away, first by Jesus, the second brother given dominion over the universe, and now by Adam, the third brother created from clay. God went on to create Eve from Adam's rib. Eve appeared, with long black hair like flowing streams, skin as white as moonlight, and a smile as bright as the dawn. She walked hand in hand with Adam, through paths covered with wildflowers, under the shade of ripe fruit trees. They laughed, bathed in the cool river, and watched fawns leaping through the bushes. The Garden of Eden was an earthly paradise, where everything was perfect. But Satan could not bear the sight. He transformed himself into a snake, with scales that glittered like emeralds. slithered through the grass, and approached Eve as she stood under the tree of knowledge. The red apple hung in the air, glistening in the sunlight like a tempting jewel. Satan whispered, his voice as smooth as the wind blowing through the leaves. "Eat, and you will know good and evil, as God." Eve, with curious eyes, reached out to touch the apple, feeling its coolness. She took a bite, and the sweetness spread, but immediately an invisible darkness enveloped her soul. Adam, seeing Eve eating, also took a bite. At that moment, the Garden of Eden shook. Dark clouds gathered, blocking out the sunlight, and a cold wind blew, rustling the leaves. God appeared, his light bright but stern. He punished Satan. "On your belly you will crawl, and dust you will eat all the days of your life," as in Genesis. Satan was thrown into hell, but he still wandered the earth, his body deformed, with crooked horns and a whipping tail, plotting revenge. The birthright on earth now belonged to Jesus, as in Matthew, which made Satan even more furious. Adam's descendants, the sons of men, born of male and female, became sons of God through Adam. Their free will was a precious gift, but also the source of temptation that Satan aimed at. Thousands of years later, on the lofty peaks of the Sinai desert, where the wind whistled through the rocks and the sun burned the earth, Moses lay down. The great prophet, with his long white hair flowing down to his shoulders, his long beard fluttering in the wind, and his sharp eyes now half closed, seemed to be in eternal sleep. His body, despite the years of leading the Israelites, still exuded divine power. He had called down manna from heaven, and the sparkling white snowflakes fell on the desert. He had parted the Red Sea, forming two towering walls of water that sparkled in the sun. He had turned rocks into clear springs of water. Moses spoke to God face to face, like friends, on Mount Sinai, where thunder roared and smoke and fire rose like pillars. Moses' body lay on the flat rock, his flesh still warm, as if his soul had not completely left. Michael appeared, his silver wings glittering like moonlight, his shining armor reflecting the divine light. The flaming sword in his hand burned brightly, radiating heat that made the air tremble. He stood guard over the body, his stern gaze scanning the space. Suddenly, a shadow appeared, like a black cloud blocking the light. Satan appeared, his tall but distorted figure, surrounded by a red halo, his eyes flashing like two sparks of fire. He growled, his deep voice echoing through the ravines. "Moses has sinned. His death belongs to me." Michael stood firm, his sword raised high, the light from it repelling Satan's darkness. He shouted loudly, "God rebuke you." Those words, "in the name of God," blew like a strong wind, causing Satan to retreat, his body shrinking in anger. Satan wanted Moses' body because he was the only one besides Jesus who performed physical miracles, healing the sick, sending down disasters, parting the sea. Possessing Moses' body would allow him to wield that power as a way of challenging God. The struggle was fought in howling winds and thunder, with Michael standing like an unmovable rock, and Satan, though mighty, unable to overcome the power of God's name. Eventually, he retreated, his body dissolving into darkness, leaving behind an angry roar that echoed across the desert. Moses' body was buried, a secret that lasted 3,000 years, only revealed through Michael's protective actions. Under the scorching sun of the desert, where the golden sand stretched out like an endless ocean, Jesus stood firmly on a rocky outcrop, his thin body exuding an unshakable divine aura. His white robe, though covered with dust, still fluttered in the hot wind, as if heaven itself was enveloping him. His long, messy brown hair partially covered his face, but his deep blue eyes were shining brightly, as if containing the light of the entire universe, penetrating all darkness. After 40 days of fasting, his body was exhausted, but his will was steadfast, not wavering in the slightest. Satan, in the form of a dark entity, stood opposite, his jet-black robe fluttering like a living night, his red eyes flashing with an evil light. He raised his hand, drawing a magnificent illusion. Golden palaces with sparkling domes, endless green fields, and silvery rivers flowing through prosperous cities. "All this will be yours," he whispered, his voice smooth as silk but laced with venom, "if you will only bow down to me." As recorded in Matthew, Satan wanted Jesus to renounce his birthright, exchanging his divine status for worldly pleasures, a plot to make him unfit to inherit the throne of the universe. Jesus stood up, the light from his body bursting forth like a sun, dispelling Satan's illusions. The golden palaces crumbled, the fields vanished, leaving only dust and dry rocks. He shouted, his voice echoing like thunder across the desert, "Get behind me, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve," as in Luke. The words were like an invisible sword, slashing straight into Satan's darkness, causing him to cower, his figure fading away in the misty wind of sand. His red eyes flashed with anger, But he knew he could not break Jesus' will. Satan did not give up. He led Jesus to a high mountain, where the wind whistled through the rocks and the blue sky stretched out endlessly. From the top, he pointed down to the kingdoms of the world, cities glowing with lights, mighty armies, and glittering treasures. "Bow once, and it will all be yours," he whispered, his voice full of temptation. But Jesus, his gaze steady, responded with a commanding silence, making Satan feel the weight of his defeat. He had once tricked angels out of heaven, lured Adam's descendants into falling, but with Jesus, all his schemes were in vain. Finally, Satan led Jesus to the top of the temple in Jerusalem, where the sunlight shone through the white stone walls. "If you are the Son of God," he challenged, "throw yourself off, for it is written that the angels will bear you up." But Jesus, in a calm voice, replied, "Do not put the Lord your God to the test." Satan, realizing that he could not win, retreated, his form dissolving like smoke in the wind, leaving Jesus standing alone, the divine light surrounding him like an invisible cloak. But Satan's plot did not stop in the desert. He knew that Jesus was the heir to the throne of the universe, and that his death on the cross would be the final blow. He orchestrated everything, from Judas's betrayal to the iron nails that pierced Jesus' hands and feet on the rough wooden cross. His blood dripped onto the dry ground, staining the dust red. But even in death, Jesus triumphed. His name, Emmanuel, was greater than Lucifer's, and his resurrection broke the power of death that Satan once held. For thousands of years, God has continued to protect his chosen people, his light bearers in a world filled with darkness. Abraham, with his silver hair and long flowing beard, stood in the fiery pit of Nimrod, the red flames licking around him but not touching his flesh. His white robes glistened in the divine light, as if God himself were enveloping him. The flames roared, but Abraham stood firm, his eyes shining with faith, and he walked out of the pit without a single burn. John the Baptist, with his muscular body, his rough animal skin covering his body, was thrown into the boiling oil. The oil splashed, smoke rose, but John was safe, his face strong, his eyes sparkling as if he saw heaven. God protected him, making the boiling oil as harmless as cool water. Daniel, in the lion's den, stood among the giant beasts with golden fur and a resounding roar. Their eyes, though fierce, softened under the divine light that radiated from Daniel. He knelt down, praying, his blue cloak fluttering, and the lions lay quietly around him like docile cats. God had muzzled them so that Daniel could walk out of the den unscathed. But Moses was still special. He was not only protected, but he also used God's power in a physical way, from calling manna from heaven, parting the Red Sea, to turning rocks into water. This made Satan desire his body, as a way to usurp the divine power that Moses once held.